Fairly Oddparents is one of the greatest animated shows of all time. Well, actually, let me rephrase that. The first 5 seasons or so of the Fairly Oddparents are some of the best animated television ever created, and then something changed, and Nickelodeon knew it. The show was canceled, outright finished, and then brought back 5 times throughout the show's run. Now, normally it's hard to identify just what went wrong with a show that connects so well with its audience for so long and then suddenly disconnects from reality altogether, but I think The Fairly Oddparents is an incredible case study in how not to keep your show relevant. It's a surprisingly obvious example of an audience being able to identify exactly what went wrong. And I think it has everything to do with character. How characters are introduced, how they're written, and how you do all of this when the studio paying your bills won't stop meddling. So I want to talk about 3 characters, in the order of the problem they created from least bad to worst. And it starts with Poof.
Step aside and watch a real puppet master captivate his audience.
Poof is introduced 6 seasons into the show's run. Poof is what I call the sympathetic character introduction. It's also the least damaging of the introductions. Poof, Cosmo and Wanda's baby, is introduced to create a sympathetic presence that amps up the cuteness and also the viral merchability of the show. A baby fairy. Poof immediately does 2 things. 1, gives Cosmo and Wanda a new set of very important problems to deal with. It's a magic baby. It's incredibly easy to write and create problems that need to be solved with, you know, this.
Wait, when the baby giggled, it saved us. I bet when it cries.
And 2, it presents a second dependent figure. Just like Timmy relies on Cosmo and Wanda, Poof does as well, giving Timmy his own new set of problems to overcome simultaneously. But Poof, in my opinion, is cheap. The writers don't have to write Poof, they just have to write the chaos. There's no chance for character growth, there's literally no dialogue. Poof exists only to be cute, to be a character we connect with aesthetically, but most importantly, Poof is an incredibly easy way to create all sorts of strange magical anarchy that would have required a bit more storytelling and creativity previously. This attempt to reinvigorate the show was designed to fail. Yes, Poof is cute, but kids and adults, both, are not going to latch onto a character that doesn't serve any function other to create obstacles, or in some cases solve them absurdly. Poof isn't a character, Poof is a plot device. A cute one, but a plot device nonetheless. Yet Poof is on the lower end of the spectrum of this problem. It's Chloe where things are amped up a bit.
Hey, lightweights, you gonna eat those? Didn't think so.
Creator of the show, Butch Hartman, would say after the show's cancellation that Chloe was created because executives at Nickelodeon thought Timmy needed a new female foil. A foil is a character in any story or narrative that acts in opposition to another character but usually avoids becoming a villain. Chloe's introduction is where the series really begins to jump the shark. See, by season 10, Poof was actually absent from a lot of the episodes because the writers were literally having a problem shoving all of the show's cast into its stories. Nick kept wanting more. Chloe is a season 10 attempt to boost interest in his show through a foil. Thanks to a shortage of fairy godparents, Timmy is suddenly forced to share Cosmo and Wanda with his neighbor. She's not great. Chloe is ambitious, incredibly virtuous, and cares about everyone and everything. She's almost entirely unrelatable to nearly everyone watching the show. But the problem with Chloe is more of a narrative issue. In an attempt to boost interest in a decades-old product, Nickelodeon forced the writers to completely undermine the one element of the show that made it successful to begin with, the fantasy of fairy godparents. The relationship between Timmy, Cosmo, and Wanda, and the desire every viewer had to have godparents of their own. The show is absolutely a machination of its premise. It is very much so foundationally built on that fantasy. Chloe encroaches on that very thing, takes the luster out of it, makes it a competition, and does so in an often annoying way. Chloe is what happens when a studio is out of touch with its own creators, and most importantly, what's special about a product. And Butch and his team were far better than Nick allowed them to be, especially around this time. Chloe undermines the fantasy that built the show. It's an introduction that leads to reduction. But nowhere is all this more evident than in the dog that practically destroyed the Fairly Oddparents.
It's the news the whole world has been waiting for, and now it's finally time to reveal Timmy Turner's magical new pet. It's Sparky the Magic Dog.
Meet Sparky. He's a magical talking dog. Now I know what you're thinking. What a novel idea. I've never seen a talking dog before, except for here, and here. But wait, there's more. Sparky is the introduction of what I like to call the energizing character. He's there to provide a new element of comedy, slapstick, and to, of course, undermine one of the show's biggest surprises by repeating it.
I know Cosmo and Wanda used to be Mr. Crocker's fairies, but Sparky was his dog too? Why didn't you guys say anything?
But he gets better. He behaves obnoxiously, talks in a strange accent, and annoys everyone watching the show to the point where he's unceremoniously cut from it, never to be seen again. Doesn't that all sound great? Sparky was the moment that it became clear that the writers had begun grasping at straws. Nickelodeon had asked a show that at its core was very simple to run for longer and become larger than it had any right to. And in an attempt to, again, introduce an extremely marketable character, swung and missed. Characters designed to bring new energy to shows, especially ones with a gimmick like a talking dog, are best introduced slowly and sparingly. One thing Sparky and really all of these characters missed is that establishing a character takes time and needs to be done delicately. It's hard and requires them to make a good first impression and make that good first impression last. And yet all three of these characters are thrown front and center in front of audiences as main characters that we're supposed to immediately care about, and done so as obnoxiously as possible. As if to say, like it or not, here they are. There's simply not much you can do when the network forces these characters onto you. You have to make the best of a bad situation.
Please don't make me move away. My odd behavior had nothing to do with Timmy Turner. I was just going through a brief rebellious phase.
What Butch Hartman and his team accomplished throughout the early years of the show's run is nothing short of remarkable. The show is funny, well written, and played with its power fantasy consistently well, while still maintaining the very personal, small scale and scope of its stories. But as the show expanded and as its scope did as well, the network and in turn the writers seemed to lose touch with the identity of that early success. They began to treat characters as ploys, as manipulative tactics to produce hype and increase ratings. It's why almost all of the show's character introductions came in the form of heavily advertised television specials. They began to treat their writing and their world as disposable, hence Sparky's total disappearance. Sure, you could argue that this is the inevitable reality of any show that runs longer than a couple seasons, but we all know that isn't necessarily true. Shows like Seinfeld, 30 Rock, and even things like Phineas and Ferb ran for hundreds of episodes, while still maintaining at least a semblance of their original quality. And yes, the Fairly Oddparents ran for far too long. Its staff had exhausted its ideas, but I think the biggest crime is a network interfering with something that they weren't equipped to understand. Let creatives be creative, and if they can't, let them ride into the sunset. But don't ever try to force your ideas into the minds of those people that came up with the great ones to begin with. The best ideas are organic, not corporate.
Dinkelberg.
That is it for today's episode of Nerdstalgic. If you enjoyed this video, press that like button down below, and if you haven't yet done so, press subscribe. That way you don't miss anything I put out on this channel. Also, next to the subscribe button is a little bell. That bell is not that scary, just make sure you're actually notified when I upload something. So hit that little bell to make sure you really don't miss anything. I do really want to add kind of a quick addendum to what was just talked about in this video. I do think Nickelodeon had started to develop a bad habit of letting their shows run far too long. I mean, we look at things like SpongeBob and it's still on TV today. And I do want to say that there is a lot to be said for things like a show's longevity and burnout, especially amongst creatives. But I think Nickelodeon has a track record of meddling way too much with some of their products. You saw it with Invader Zim, you saw it with Chalk Zone, you even saw it with things like Teenage Robot, and I've talked about those things in the past. In fact, they might be recommended on this video, or you can check my channel to see my videos about those. But it is a solvable problem and one that I hope they address moving forward. Anyways, on your screen right now are going to be 2 more videos on Nerdstalgic. You can kind of see what I've done recently by clicking either of those, and I will hopefully see you guys in the next video.